Zthar pressed his clawed hand against the observation deck's reinforced glass and watched. The human transport ship dock at Meridian Point. The vessel looked pathetic compared to the sleek Vorthan warships that dominated the station's military bay. Its hull was rounded and smooth, lacking the sharp edges and weapon ports that marked proper military craft. Even the civilian ships of lesser species showed more aggressive design than this soft-looking thing the humans called a diplomatic vessel. The young Vorthan warrior flexed his natural armor plates and felt the familiar weight of his bone spurs beneath his skin. His people were born for war, bred for conflict over thousands of years until violence became as natural as breathing. Every Vorthan could tear through metal with their bare hands, and their thick hide could stop most energy weapons. They were what a warrior species should be, not like these strange new creatures that had recently joined the galactic community. War leader Thakmor approached from behind, his massive frame casting a shadow over Zthar. The older Vorthan's battle scars told stories of countless victories, each mark a testament to his strength. "The humans arrive," he growled, his voice carrying the deep rumble that came from a throat designed for intimidation. "Watch them closely, young warrior. See how they move, how they speak, how they show their weakness." Zthar nodded and turned his attention to the docking bay below. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, and the first humans emerged into the station's main corridor. They moved with none of the proud bearing that marked true warriors. Instead, they walked with an easy, relaxed gait that spoke of either supreme confidence or complete naivety. Given what Zthar had heard about their species, he suspected the latter. The human leader was a male of average height with short brown hair and wearing what appeared to be a simple blue uniform. He carried no visible weapons, showed no natural armor, and his soft skin looked like it would tear at the slightest touch. This was Jake Morrison, according to the intelligence reports, their diplomatic commander. Behind him walked a female with dark hair pulled back in a practical style, her hands empty except for a small medical kit. Dr. Lisa Bennett, their xenobiologist and healer. The third human caught Zthar's attention more than the others. This one had the bearing of a military officer, his posture straight and his eyes constantly scanning the area around them. Alex Rivera, their military advisor, at least looked like he understood the concept of danger. But even he seemed relaxed, his hands loose at his sides instead of positioned near weapons. "Look at them," Thakmor said with obvious disgust. "They walk among potential enemies without fear, without preparation. They show their backs to strangers and smile at species they have never met. Either they are the most foolish race in the galaxy, or they hide their true nature behind this pathetic display." Zthar watched as the humans approached a group of Klaxi traders. The insectoid species were known for their aggressive trading practices and their tendency to test new species through intimidation. Their compound eyes glittered with predatory interest as they surrounded the human delegation. One of the larger Klaxi, his mandibles clicking with obvious threat, moved uncomfortably close to Dr. Bennett. What happened next confused Zthar greatly. Instead of backing away or showing signs of fear, the human female simply looked up at the towering insectoid and smiled. She spoke in a calm, pleasant voice that somehow carried across the noisy docking bay. "Hello, I'm Dr. Bennett. I've read about your species in our databases. Your exoskeleton structure is fascinating from a biological perspective." The Klaxi warrior paused, his aggressive posture faltering at the unexpected response. Dr. Bennett continued talking, asking questions about Klaxi biology and culture with genuine interest. Within minutes, the potential confrontation had transformed into an animated discussion about comparative anatomy. The other Klaxi joined in, their threatening behavior replaced by what almost looked like enthusiasm. Jake Morrison had moved on to greet other species with the same easy manner. He spoke to a group of Aquarian merchants as if they were old friends, discussing trade routes and mutual interests. His relaxed demeanor seemed to affect everyone around him, creating an atmosphere of cooperation rather than competition. "This is their weakness," Thakmor declared, though his voice held a note of uncertainty. They treat potential enemies as friends. They show trust where they should show strength. They will not survive long in a galaxy where only the strong prosper. But Zthar found himself studying the humans more carefully. There was something about their behavior that didn't quite match what he expected from a weak species. They showed no fear, but they also showed no aggression. They were polite without being submissive, confident without being arrogant. It was like watching a completely different kind of creature, one that operated by rules he didn't understand. Alex Rivera had positioned himself where he could observe the entire docking bay while still appearing casual. His eyes missed nothing, cataloging every species present and their positions. When a group of Saurian mercenaries entered the bay, the human military advisor's attention sharpened almost imperceptibly. He didn't move, didn't change his relaxed posture, but something in his stillness suggested he was ready for action. Dr. Bennett had somehow managed to gather representatives from 6 different species around her, all of them talking excitedly about their various biological adaptations. She listened to each one with genuine fascination, asking questions that showed both intelligence and respect. Even the normally hostile reptilian traders seemed charmed by her obvious interest in their culture. Jake Morrison was conducting what appeared to be impromptu diplomatic negotiations, mediating a minor dispute between 2 trading groups with such skill that both sides seemed pleased with the outcome. His voice never rose above a conversational tone, but his words carried a weight that commanded attention from species that usually respected only strength. "I will observe them more closely," Zthar told his commander. "Perhaps their weakness can be exploited. If they trust so easily, they should be simple to manipulate." Fake Moore's approval rumbled through his chest. "Yes, young warrior, learn their ways, discover their vulnerabilities. The Vorthan Empire may find these humans useful as servants once they understand their proper place in the galaxy. But as Zthar watched the humans continue their interactions, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to them than met the eye. They moved through the dangerous environment of Meridian Point like they belonged there, showing neither the arrogance of the strong nor the fear of the weak. They were something else entirely, and that thought was beginning to worry him more than he cared to admit. Zthar spent the next several days watching the humans from various locations around Meridian Point. He told himself it was intelligence gathering, but truthfully, their behavior fascinated him in ways he couldn't explain. They moved through the station like they had lived there for years, adapting to new situations with an ease that seemed almost supernatural. The medical bay became his first observation post. Dr. Bennett worked there almost constantly, treating injured beings from dozens of different species. Zthar watched from the corridor as she examined a wounded crystalline trader whose silicon-based biology was completely unlike anything from her own world. She studied reference materials, asked careful questions, and somehow managed to stabilize the creature's damaged lattice structure using techniques she had apparently learned in just a few hours. What struck Zthar most was how she treated every patient the same way. When a Vorthan dock worker came in with a crushed hand, she showed the same gentle care she had given the crystalline. When a group of Klaxi younglings arrived with injuries from a training accident, she worked on them with the same focused attention she gave to everyone else. She didn't seem to distinguish between friend and enemy, between powerful and weak, between beautiful and hideous. A Saurian mercenary brought in his injured partner, clearly expecting to pay for treatment. Dr. Bennett simply looked at the wounded creature and began working immediately. When the Saurian tried to discuss payment, she waved him off without even looking up from her patient. "We can talk about that later," she said quietly. "Right now, your friend needs help." The Saurian stared at her in confusion. In his culture, nothing was given without payment or trade. The idea of helping a stranger without immediate reward seemed to break his understanding of how the universe worked. But Dr. Bennett continued her work, completely focused on healing the injured creature. And gradually the Saurian's suspicious expression changed to something like wonder. Zthar found himself moving to the station's common areas, where Jake Morrison spent much of his time. The human diplomat had an unusual habit of simply sitting in busy areas and talking to whoever approached him. He didn't seem to be conducting official business or pursuing any particular agenda. He just talked to people, listened to their stories, and somehow made them feel heard. An elderly Aquarian trader sat down beside Jake one afternoon, looking tired and discouraged. Zthar positioned himself close enough to hear their conversation. The Aquarian explained how his shipping business was failing because larger companies kept undercutting his prices. He couldn't compete with their resources and would probably have to sell his ship and work for someone else. Jake listened without interrupting, asking occasional questions that showed he understood the challenges the Aquarian faced. When the old trader finished his story, Jake didn't offer empty sympathy or impossible solutions. Instead, he suggested specific trade routes that might be more profitable for a smaller operation and mentioned other independent traders who might be interested in forming a cooperative. By the end of their conversation, the Aquarian's entire demeanor had changed. He sat straighter, his voice carried more confidence, and he spoke about his business with renewed hope. Jake had given him something more valuable than money or resources. He had given him a reason to believe things could get better. Zthar watched this scene repeat itself dozens of times over the following days. Jake talked to maintenance workers, security guards, traders, diplomats, and refugees. Each conversation seemed to leave the other person feeling better about their situation. It was like watching someone cast a spell, except the magic was nothing. More than genuine attention and thoughtful advice, Alex Rivera proved to be the most interesting human to observe. He spent time in the station's recreation areas, where off-duty security personnel and military officers from various species gathered. To relax, unlike the other humans, Alex seemed to have no particular agenda beyond enjoying himself. He played games, shared stories, and participated in friendly competitions with beings from across the galaxy. Zthar watched Alex arm wrestle with a Vorthan security officer twice his size. The human lost, of course, but he laughed about it and bought drinks for everyone present. Later, he joined a strategy game between several Klaxi officers and managed to hold his own, despite being unfamiliar with their tactics. When an Aquarian pilot challenged him to a flight simulation, Alex accepted eagerly, even though he had never flown an Aquarian vessel before. What puzzled Zthar was how easily Alex formed connections with these potential enemies. By the end of each evening, the human was surrounded by officers from species that had been fighting each other for centuries, all of them laughing and sharing stories like old friends. It seemed impossible that someone could be so universally liked without some kind of deception involved. The breaking point came when Zthar overheard Alex talking to a young reptilian officer who had been ostracized by his own people for questioning their aggressive traditions. The reptilian was bitter and angry, convinced that strength was the only thing that mattered in the universe. Alex listened to his complaints without judgment, then quietly began telling stories about his own experiences. The stories were unlike anything Zthar had heard before. Alex spoke of humans who had faced impossible odds and refused to give up. He told of soldiers who had held positions against overwhelming forces not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to protect something important. He described rescue workers who had risked their lives to save strangers, explorers who had ventured into deadly situations to expand knowledge, and ordinary people who had done extraordinary things when circumstances demanded it. These weren't the peaceful, gentle stories Zthar had expected from a diplomatic species. These were tales of determination, sacrifice, and a kind of stubborn refusal to accept defeat that seemed almost insane. The humans in Alex's stories didn't win because they were stronger or smarter than their enemies. They won because they simply would not stop trying. No matter how hopeless the situation became, the young reptilian listened with growing fascination, his bitter expression gradually changing to something like respect. When Alex finished, the reptilian sat quietly for a long moment before speaking. "Your people fight differently than ours," he said finally. "We fight for dominance, for territory, for resources. But you fight for ideas, for other people, for things that have no physical form." "That seems both foolish and terrifying," Alex smiled and raised his drink in a toast. "To fighting for foolish things," he said. May we always be brave enough to protect what matters, even when it doesn't make sense. Zthar found himself thinking about those words long after the conversation ended. What did humans consider worth fighting for? What would drive a species? That seemed so peaceful to the kind of desperate determination Alex had described. And perhaps most importantly, what would happen if someone threatened the things humans had decided to protect? The questions followed him back to his quarters, where he spent the night staring at the ceiling and wondering if he was beginning to understand something important about these strange, soft creatures who had joined the galactic community with such quiet confidence. The emergency alert shattered the peaceful atmosphere of Meridian Point like a hammer through glass. Zthar was in the observation lounge when the station's communication system crackled to life with desperate voices from the outer rim. He watched the holographic display materialize in the center of the room, showing a map of the local sector with red warning indicators flashing across multiple locations. Pirates from the Crimson Nebula had struck again. This time they had hit the Kepler mining colony, a civilian outpost that housed families from dozens of different species. The attackers had overwhelmed the minimal security forces and taken hundreds of hostages, including children. The distress signals painted a picture of chaos and terror as the pirates began making their demands. Zthar moved closer to the display, studying the tactical situation. The Kepler colony was positioned in a difficult location, surrounded by asteroid fields that would make any rescue attempt extremely dangerous. The pirates had chosen their target well, knowing that the natural barriers would limit the response options of any rescue force around the lounge. Representatives from various species gathered to watch the unfolding crisis. Vorthan officers discussed the military challenges of approaching the colony through the asteroid field. Klaxi traders calculated the economic impact of losing a major mining operation. Aquarian diplomats debated the legal complications of mounting a rescue mission in neutral space. The humans stood apart from the others, clustered around their own portable communication device. Jake Morrison listened intently to the reports coming in from the colony, his usual pleasant expression growing more serious with each update. Dr. Bennett's hands clenched into fists as she heard descriptions of injured civilians who couldn't receive proper medical care. Alex Rivera stood perfectly still, but something in his posture had changed completely. A new transmission arrived from the colony, and the lounge fell silent as the voice of the pirate leader filled the room. Bloodclaw Vex was a notorious Saurian, who had been terrorizing the Outer Rim for years. His reputation for cruelty was legendary, and his distinctive scarred face had become a symbol of fear throughout the sector. "I speak to all who can hear this message," Bloodclaw Vex snarled, his voice carrying the harsh accent of the outer colonies. "The Kepler colony now belongs to the Crimson Nebula. We hold over 300 hostages, including 57 younglings of various species. Our demands are simple: 10 million credits in untraceable currency, delivered within 48 hours, or we begin executing prisoners." The transmission included video footage from the colony, showing terrified families huddled together in the main mining facility. Children of different species clung to their parents while armed pirates moved among them with casual brutality. The images were designed to inspire fear and quick compliance with the demands. Zthar watched the various species representatives react to the ultimatum. Some began discussing payment options, calculating whether the cost of ransom would be less than the expense of a military operation. Others debated the political implications of negotiating with terrorists. A few suggested that the hostages were acceptable losses if it meant avoiding a dangerous precedent. The human reaction was different. Jake Morrison's diplomatic mask didn't slip, but it seemed to become more rigid, like armor being put on for battle. His voice remained calm and professional as he activated his communication device, but his words carried an undertone that made Zthar's skin crawl. "This is Captain Morrison of the Human Diplomatic Mission," he said, speaking directly to the pirates. "We are prepared to discuss terms for the release of all hostages. No harm must come to any of the prisoners during negotiations. This is not a request. Dr. Bennett was no longer the gentle healer Zthar had observed over the past weeks. She moved with quick, efficient motions as she began gathering medical supplies and equipment. Her hands were steady, but her eyes held a cold anger. That seemed completely at odds with her caring nature. She spoke quietly to Jake and Alex, her voice too low for Zthar to hear, but her expression suggested she was discussing something far more serious than medical preparation. Alex Rivera had become someone else entirely. The friendly, laughing human who had shared drinks with alien soldiers was gone, replaced by something that made Zthar's warrior instincts scream warnings. Alex wasn't showing any obvious signs of aggression, but his stillness had a quality that reminded Zthar of a predator preparing to strike. The pirates responded to Jake's diplomatic overture with predictable arrogance. Bloodclaw Vex appeared. On screen again, his scarred face twisted into a cruel smile. "Humans," he laughed. "I have heard of your species. Soft creatures who think words can solve everything. Perhaps I should demonstrate the price of your weakness." The video feed switched to show 3 hostages being dragged before the camera. A young Aquarian female, an elderly Vorthan male, and a Klaxi child barely old enough to speak. The pirates forced them to their knees while Bloodclaw Vex drew his weapon with theatrical slowness. "You have 47 hours to deliver the credits," he announced. "For every hour you are late, 1 hostage dies. But since you humans seem to think you can negotiate, let me show you what happens to those who waste my time." The execution was swift and brutal. 3 lives ended in an instant while the remaining hostages screamed in terror. The pirates laughed at the carnage, treating the murder of innocents as entertainment. Bloodclaw Vex looked directly into the camera with satisfaction. Clearly believing he had demonstrated his power effectively, the transmission ended, leaving the lounge in stunned silence. Around the room, various species began discussing response options with renewed urgency. Some called for immediate payment of the ransom. Others suggested that military action was now inevitable. A few muttered about the need to accept that some hostages would be lost. Zthar found himself watching the humans instead of listening to the debates. What he saw made his blood run cold. Jake Morrison stood motionless for a long moment, his head slightly bowed. When he finally looked up, his eyes held something that Zthar had never seen in a supposedly peaceful species. "Alex," Jake said quietly, his voice barely audible above the surrounding discussions. "You have operational command. Primary objective is hostage recovery. Secondary objective is complete elimination of the Crimson Nebula organization. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. No survivors among the pirates." Alex Rivera nodded once, his expression never changing. "Understood, Captain. Dr. Bennett, prepare for mass casualty treatment. We'll need trauma facilities ready for immediate deployment." Dr. Bennett's response was equally calm. "Medical teams will be ready? I'll also need body bags, Jake, lots of them." The casual way she spoke about death while preparing to save lives sent a chill through Zthar's body. These weren't the gentle, peaceful humans he had been observing. These were something else entirely, something that had been hidden beneath their diplomatic facade. As the humans began making their preparations, Zthar realized that he was about to witness something that would change his understanding of what these creatures truly were. The pirates had made a fatal error in judgment, mistaking human compassion for weakness. They had just awakened something that had been sleeping behind kind eyes and gentle words. War leader Thakemore appeared beside Zthar, his massive frame tense with anticipation. "Now we will see what these humans are truly made of," he rumbled. "Perhaps they will prove more interesting than we initially believed." Zthar nodded, but his attention remained focused on the humans. They were no longer the diplomatic team that had arrived at Meridian Point. They had become something else, something that moved with quiet purpose and spoke in voices that carried the promise of violence. He was beginning to understand that he had been watching the wrong thing all along. The humans' peaceful nature wasn't their weakness. It was their choice, and that choice had just been revoked. The joint task force assembled faster than Zthar had thought possible. Within 6 hours of the pirate ultimatum, Ships from multiple species had formed a loose fleet heading toward the Kepler mining colony. Vorthan cruisers brought their heavy weapons and thick armor, while Klaxi swarm ships prepared to overwhelm the enemy with sheer numbers. Aquarian vessels provided long-range scanning capabilities, and several other species contributed their own specialized skills. Zthar found himself assigned to one of the human ships, officially as a liaison officer but really as an observer, for the Vorthan Empire. The vessel was larger than it had appeared from outside, with corridors that seemed designed for efficiency rather than intimidation. Everything was clean, functional, and strangely quiet compared to the constant noise of Vorthan. Warships. The human crew moved through their preparations with mechanical precision. There was no shouting, no displays of aggression, no ritual challenges, or boasts about upcoming victories. They simply worked, checking systems, loading weapons, and reviewing tactical plans with the same calm professionalism they had shown during diplomatic meetings. Alex Rivera stood at the center of the ship's command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the tactical situation. The asteroid field around Kepler colony created a maze of potential approach routes, each one more dangerous than the last. The pirates had positioned their ships to take advantage of the natural barriers, creating killing zones that would destroy any conventional assault. Primary assault team will approach from Vector 77 Alpha, Alex announced to the gathered officers. Stealth capabilities will allow us to penetrate the outer perimeter without detection. Once we're inside the field, we switch to active hunting mode. A Vorthan captain objected immediately. That approach route is suicide. The asteroids create too many blind spots, and the pirates will have sensors covering every possible entry. Point. We should use our superior firepower to blast through their defenses directly. Alex's response was patient but firm. Direct assault will result in hostage casualties. The pirates will execute prisoners the moment they detect our approach. We need to be inside their perimeter before they know we're coming. The Klaxi commander chittered his disagreement. Our swarm tactics can overwhelm their defenses quickly. Many small ships attacking from multiple directions will confuse their targeting systems. Some losses are acceptable if we achieve victory. No losses are acceptable, Alex replied, his voice carrying a finality that ended the debate. Every hostage comes home alive. That is not negotiable. Zthar watched the human planning session with growing unease. The other species were preparing for a battle, discussing acceptable casualty rates and victory conditions. The humans were planning something entirely different, something that treated the rescue of every single hostage as the only measure of success. Dr. Bennett appeared on the command center's communication screen, reporting from the medical bay. Trauma facilities are ready for immediate deployment. I have teams standing by to treat injuries from 17 different species. We're also prepared for psychological trauma counseling and long-term recovery support. What about the pirates? Asked a reptilian officer. Will you be treating their wounded as well? Dr. Bennett's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. There won't be any wounded pirates to treat. The certainty in her voice made Zthar's skin crawl. This was the same woman who had spent days healing injured beings from across the galaxy, showing equal care to everyone who needed help. Now, she spoke about the coming battle with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly what was going to happen. The fleet reached the outer edge of the asteroid field as the pirates' deadline approached. Bloodclaw Vex sent another transmission, showing more hostages and demanding immediate payment. His arrogance was obvious as he described the painful deaths he would inflict on the prisoners if his demands weren't met. Jake Morrison responded from the flagship, his diplomatic mask firmly in place. We are preparing to transfer the requested funds. However, we need time to verify the hostage's condition and ensure proper exchange protocols. We request a 12-hour extension to complete the transaction. The pirate leader laughed at the request. Humans and their endless talking. Very well, you have 12 hours. But if you try to trick me, I will make sure every hostage dies screaming. The transmission ended, and the fleet began moving into the asteroid field. Zthar expected the humans to brief the other species on their battle plan, but instead they simply wished them luck and began following their own route through the dangerous terrain. The human ships moved through the asteroids like ghosts, their stealth systems making them nearly invisible to sensors. Zthar watched in fascination as they navigated passages that seemed impossibly narrow, threading between massive rocks with precision that required either incredible skill or complete insanity. "How are we not being detected?" he asked the human officer beside him. "The pirates are expecting a frontal assault," she replied calmly. "They're watching for large formations and aggressive movements. They're not looking for small groups moving slowly through the back passages." As they penetrated deeper into the asteroid field, Zthar began to understand the true nature of the human approach. This wasn't a battle plan designed to defeat the enemy in glorious combat. It was a hunting strategy, meant to stalk prey that didn't know it was being hunted. The first pirate ship died without ever knowing the humans were there. One moment it was patrolling its assigned sector, the next it was drifting wreckage scattered across the asteroid field. The attack had been so precise and so quiet that the other pirates didn't even realize they had lost a vessel. "Target eliminated," reported the weapons officer with the same tone he might use to announce the completion of a routine maintenance check. The systematic elimination of the pirate fleet continued with mechanical efficiency. Each ship was isolated, surrounded, and destroyed before it could send a warning to the others. The humans moved through their enemies like a disease, spreading through the fleet and leaving nothing but debris in their wake. Zthar found himself pressed against the observation window, watching the human fighters work. They didn't engage in dramatic dogfights or flashy maneuvers. Instead, they used coordinated attacks and superior technology to ensure that every engagement was completely one-sided. The pirates never had a chance to fight back. "This isn't warfare," he whispered to himself. "This is extermination." The human officer overheard his comment and turned to look at him. "War is what happens between equals," she said quietly. "This is something else entirely." The final phase of the assault began as the human forces reached the mining colony itself. The pirates had fortified the facility and positioned their remaining ships to cover all approach routes. They were confident in their defenses, certain that no rescue force could penetrate their stronghold without massive casualties. "Alex," Rivera's voice came over the communication system, speaking to all human forces. "Remember, hostages are the priority? Every pirate dies, but every hostage lives. Make it clean, make it quick, and make it final." The response from the human forces was immediate and unanimous. "Understood, sir. No mercy for the pirates, no harm to the hostages." As the human assault began, Zthar realized that he was watching the death of his illusions about this species. The gentle, peaceful humans who had arrived at Meridian Point were gone, replaced by something that moved with lethal purpose and spoke in voices that promised annihilation. The pirates had made a terrible mistake. They had threatened the innocent, murdered the defenseless, and done it in front of a species that had apparently decided such actions were unforgivable. Now they were going to learn what happened when humans stopped being diplomatic and started being something else entirely. Zthar pressed his face against the observation window and watched the beginning of the end for the Crimson Nebula. The humans were no longer hiding what they truly were, and what they were was far more terrifying than any warrior species he had ever encountered. The boarding operation began in complete silence. Zthar found himself following a human assault team through the mining colony's maintenance tunnels, moving toward the main facility where the hostages were being held. The humans moved like liquid shadow, their footsteps making no sound on the metal flooring. Every motion was precise, calculated, and utterly deadly. The team leader was a human female named Kate Sullivan, a specialist in close combat operations. She communicated with her team through hand signals and subtle gestures, coordinating their movement with the efficiency of a machine. Behind her visor, her eyes were cold and focused, showing no emotion as they approached their targets. They encountered the first pirate guard at a junction between two corridors. The Saurian was armed with a heavy energy weapon and positioned to cover the main approach to the hostage area. He never saw the humans coming. One moment he was standing at his post, the next he was on the ground with his neck broken. The entire encounter lasted less than 3 seconds and made no noise at all. Zthar stared at the dead pirate, shocked by the casual efficiency of the kill. Kate Sullivan had moved with the same calm precision she might use to open a door or check her equipment. There was no anger, no satisfaction, no emotion at all. She had simply eliminated an obstacle and moved on to the next task. The human team continued through the facility, leaving a trail of dead pirates behind them. Each kill was swift, silent, and absolutely final. The pirates never had time to raise an alarm or call for help. They simply ceased to exist, removed from the equation with surgical precision. In the main chamber, Bloodclaw Vex was becoming increasingly agitated. His communication with the human fleet had been cut off, and his patrols were failing to report in. He suspected treachery but couldn't understand how anyone could penetrate his defenses without triggering every alarm in the facility. Double. The guards around the hostages, he snarled to his remaining subordinates. If those soft humans think they can trick me, they will learn the price of deception. The hostages huddled together in the center of the chamber, surrounded by nervous pirates who were beginning to realize that something was very wrong. Children from multiple species clung to their parents while the adults tried to provide comfort, despite their own terror. The executions from the previous day had left everyone in a state of shock, knowing that their lives could end at any moment. Kate Sullivan's team reached the chamber's upper levels, positioning themselves in the maintenance crawlways that ran above the main floor. Through the metal grating, they could see the entire hostage area and count every pirate guard. The human team spread out silently, each member taking position to cover a specific section of the chamber. Dr. Bennett's voice came through their communication system, barely audible even through their enhanced hearing devices. Medical teams are in position. Trauma facilities are ready for immediate deployment. Priority treatment protocols are established for all species present. Understood, Kate replied in a whisper that was quieter than breathing. Beginning hostage recovery in 30 seconds. What happened next defied everything Zthar understood about combat. The human team moved with perfect coordination, dropping through the ceiling grates and eliminating the pirate guards before they could react. Each pirate was engaged simultaneously, ensuring that none of them could threaten the hostages or trigger any explosive devices. The rescue operation was over in less than 10 seconds. Every pirate guard was dead, their weapons secured, and the hostages were being moved to safety by human soldiers, who had switched from lethal killers to gentle protectors in the span of a heartbeat. Zthar watched a human soldier kneel beside a terrified Aquarian child, offering comfort with the same hands that had just killed 3 pirates. The soldier's voice was soft and reassuring as he explained that everything would be okay, that the bad people were gone, and that help was coming. Dr. Bennett arrived with her medical team, immediately beginning to treat the injured hostages. She worked with the same focused care Zthar had observed on Meridian Point, but now he understood what drove that dedication. Every gentle touch, every soothing word, every moment of compassion was balanced by the absolute ruthlessness she had shown toward those who had threatened her patients. Bloodclaw Vex made his final stand in the facility's command center, surrounded by his remaining followers. He had rigged the station's power core to explode, threatening to destroy the entire colony if the humans didn't withdraw. His scarred face twisted with rage as he screamed threats and ultimatums at the advancing human forces. Alex Rivera entered the command center alone, his hands empty and his expression calm. He looked at the pirate leader with the same polite attention he might give to a diplomatic negotiation. "You have one opportunity to surrender," he said quietly. "Disable the explosive device and release control of the facility. This is the only offer you will receive." Bloodclaw Vex laughed with genuine amusement. "You think I fear death, human? I have terrorized this sector for 20 years. I will not be defeated by soft creatures who pretend to be warriors." Alex nodded as if he had expected this response. I understand, you're not afraid of death. But you should be afraid of what comes before it. The pirate leader's expression changed as he realized that Alex wasn't alone. Human soldiers had surrounded the command center, their weapons trained on every pirate present. But they weren't preparing to shoot. They were preparing to capture, and something in their stillness suggested that death would be a mercy compared to what they had planned. You killed children, Alex continued, his voice never rising above a conversational tone. You tortured innocent people for your own amusement. You made the mistake of believing that cruelty was strength, and you did it in front of a species that considers the protection of the innocent to be sacred. Bloodclaw Vex's hand moved toward the detonator, but he never reached it. The human soldiers moved with the same precise efficiency they had shown throughout the operation, disabling the pirates without killing them. The explosive device was neutralized, the facility was secured, and the pirate leader found himself very much alive and completely helpless. What are you going to do with us? One of the captured pirates asked, his voice shaking with fear. Alex's response was delivered with the same calm politeness he had shown during diplomatic meetings. You will be turned over to the appropriate authorities for trial and punishment. However, I should mention that the families of your victims have been notified of your capture. I'm sure they will be very interested in attending your legal proceedings. The implications of his words sank in slowly, and Zthar watched the captured pirates' faces change from defiance to terror. They had spent years creating enemies across the galaxy, and now they would face justice administered by every species they had wronged. Death in battle would have been swift and honorable. What awaited them now would be neither as the human forces completed their mission. Zthar found himself observing their transition back to their peaceful roles. The same soldiers who had moved through the facility like angels of death were now helping hostages contact their families, providing comfort to traumatized children and ensuring that everyone received proper medical care. The transformation was seamless and complete. Within minutes of the last pirate being captured, the humans had become the gentle, caring beings Zthar had originally observed. They spoke in soft voices, moved with careful consideration for others, and showed infinite patience with the rescued hostages. But now Zthar understood the truth. The humans' capacity for compassion wasn't separate from their capacity for violence. They were the same thing, two sides of a single coin that determined who deserved protection and who deserved destruction. The pirates had forced the humans to choose, and they had chosen with absolute finality. As medical teams treated the last of the injured hostages, Zthar realized that he had witnessed something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He had seen what humans truly were beneath their diplomatic facade, and the knowledge filled him with a terror that no amount of warrior training could overcome. 3 months had passed since the Kepler colony rescue, and life aboard Meridian Point had returned to what most beings considered normal. The same traders conducted their business, the same diplomats held their meetings, and the same maintenance crews kept the station running smoothly. To casual observers, nothing had changed except for the absence of pirate attacks in the outer rim sectors. Zthar knew better. He had spent those months watching the humans with new eyes, seeing patterns that had been invisible before. Jake Morrison still conducted diplomatic negotiations with his usual patience and skill, but now Zthar noticed how other species listened to him with a different kind of attention. When the human diplomat suggested trade agreements or security arrangements, his words carried weight that had nothing to do with economic incentives. Dr. Bennett continued her medical work in the station's hospital, treating patients from dozens of different species with the same gentle care she had always shown. But Zthar observed how other beings spoke about her with a mixture of gratitude and awe. They remembered her dedication during the hostage crisis, how she had worked tirelessly to heal the rescued civilians. While showing no mercy to those who had harmed them, Alex Rivera still spent his evenings in the recreation areas, playing games, and sharing stories with off-duty personnel from various military forces. His friendly demeanor hadn't changed, but the other officers treated him with a respect that bordered on reverence. They had heard about the Kepler operation through unofficial channels, and they understood that the laughing human who bought drinks for everyone was also capable of orchestrating the complete destruction of an entire pirate organization. The most significant change was something that most beings didn't consciously notice but felt nonetheless. The humans had quietly established a network of relationships, agreements, and mutual support systems that stretched across multiple sectors. They called it a friendship network, but Zthar recognized it for what it truly was, the foundation of an empire built on loyalty rather than fear. Every species that had lost citizens to pirate attacks found themselves receiving offers of assistance from human medical teams, engineering specialists, and security advisors. The help came without conditions or payment requirements, offered simply because people had been hurt and needed support. But each act of kindness created a bond of gratitude that connected the humans to civilizations across the galaxy. The Aquarian Merchant Confederation had signed exclusive trade agreements with human worlds after their colonies received free medical supplies during a plague outbreak. The Crystalline Federation had established joint research programs with human scientists who had helped them develop new energy technologies. Even the Proudvorthan Empire had begun consulting with human military advisors after witnessing their tactical capabilities during the hostage rescue. Zthar realized that the humans were doing something unprecedented in galactic history. They were creating an alliance based on genuine affection rather than military dominance or economic necessity. Species that had fought each other for centuries were now cooperating because they all shared positive relationships with the same human intermediaries. The fate of the Crimson Nebula pirates served as a constant reminder of what happened to those who threatened the humans' expanding circle of friends. The organization had been completely dismantled, not through dramatic battles but through careful investigation and systematic elimination. Every pirate base had been located and destroyed, every leader had been captured or killed, and every stolen resource had been returned to its rightful owners. Bloodclaw Vex himself had been turned over to a tribunal, composed of representatives from every species his organization had wronged. The trial had lasted for weeks, with victim after victim testifying about the suffering he had caused. The pirate leader had tried to maintain his arrogant defiance, but the weight of evidence and the hatred of his victims had broken him completely. His execution had been broadcast across the galaxy, not as entertainment but as a warning. The message was clear: those who harmed innocent people would face justice, and that justice would be thorough, patient, and absolutely final. The humans had demonstrated that their commitment to protecting the innocent wasn't limited by distance, politics, or species boundaries. Zthar found himself in the observation lounge where he had first watched the humans arrive, staring out at the same docking bay where their transport ship had seemed so pathetically vulnerable. A new human vessel was arriving, carrying another diplomatic team to some distant negotiation. To most observers, it would appear to be just another peaceful mission by a species devoted to mutual understanding and cooperation. But Zthar could see the truth beneath the surface. The humans weren't just diplomats or traders or explorers. They were something far more dangerous. A species that had learned to weaponize their own compassion. They didn't conquer through force or intimidation. They conquered through kindness, creating bonds of loyalty that were stronger than any military alliance. Their true strength wasn't their technology or their tactical skills, though both were formidable. Their strength was their ability to make other beings want to protect them, to fight for them, to stand with them against any threat. They had created a galaxy full of friends who would defend human interests as fiercely as they would defend their own. War leader Thakemore appeared beside him, his massive frame casting its familiar shadow. "What have you learned about the humans, young warrior?" he asked, his voice carrying the same dismissive tone he had used months earlier. Zthar turned to face his commander, choosing his words carefully. "They are not what they appear to be," he said finally. "They are not weak, they are not naive, and they are not harmless. They are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and they have made us all complicit in their expansion." Thakemore's expression showed confusion. "Explain," They make us want to help them, Zthar replied. They show us kindness, they heal our wounded, they protect our innocent, and they never ask for anything in return. But every act of generosity creates a debt of gratitude, and every debt becomes a bond of loyalty. They are conquering the galaxy through friendship, and we are helping them do it. The older Warthen considered this explanation for a long moment. And what do you recommend we do about this threat? Zthar looked back at the docking bay, where human personnel were already greeting representatives from multiple species with their characteristic warmth and openness. Nothing, he said quietly, because they are not actually threatening us. They are protecting us, caring for us, and making our lives better. The only beings who have anything to fear from humans are those who would harm the innocent. Then they are not truly dangerous, Fakemore concluded. No, Zthar replied, remembering the cold efficiency of the human assault teams and the systematic destruction of the pirate fleet. They are far more dangerous than anyone realizes. They have convinced us that their success is our success, their safety is our safety, and their enemies are our enemies. They have made us willing participants in their empire. He paused, watching. Dr. Bennett emerged from the human ship and immediately began greeting the medical staff from several species who had come to welcome her. Her smile was genuine, her concern for their well-being was real, and her dedication to healing was absolute. She was exactly what she appeared to be, a caring, compassionate person who wanted to help others. The truly terrifying thing, Zthar continued, is that they mean every word they say. Their friendship is genuine, their compassion is real, and their commitment to protecting the innocent is absolute. They are not pretending to be good people. They actually are good people. And that makes them unstoppable. As he walked away from the observation deck, Zthar reflected on the report he would submit to the Vorthen Empire. He would warn his people about the true nature of human expansion, about the danger of underestimating a species that conquered through kindness. But he knew that his warnings would be ignored, just as they had been ignored by every other species the humans had encountered. The humans would continue to spread across the galaxy, making friends and allies wherever they went. They would heal the sick, protect the innocent, and stand against those who would do harm. And with each act of compassion, each gesture of friendship, each moment of genuine care, they would bind more species to their cause. The galaxy was being conquered by a species that genuinely wanted to make it a better place. And the most terrifying part of all was that they were succeeding.